Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan, MS Pierce's Ukraine War Frontline update for the 13th of May 2023. I've had breakfast now, so I'm in the zone, a cup of tea in me. Let's go to the front line. We're going to go to the northeast sector first, as ever. Sometimes I do a bit of preamble, not today. Kupiansk-Kreminna to Kreminna. That is Kupiansk on my map here, Svatova there, and Kreminna further down south. Been a little talk in the ISW about the shenanigans going on there. The Russian MOD denied that Ukrainian forces broke through Russian lines in Kupiansk and Liman directions on May the 11th, instead claiming that Russian forces repelled Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups near Kotel and Dibrova and Kreminna. So sort of trying to distract from stuff that's been happening perhaps around the Kupiansk and Liman direction. The MOD also posted footage on May the 12th of Russian forces using T-90, T-18, T-72B3 tanks and BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles conducting ground attacks near Spirna. Now, I talked a little bit about Spirna over the last couple of days, that the Russians may have made some really small advances there, but they've lost quite a lot of equipment. So the Russians using talking about or giving you footage of the use of these vehicles is indicative of a couple of things. I think one, they're trying to amplify where they are doing things properly and using combined arms to try and gain ground where they are having a lack of success elsewhere. But also, this plays into the idea that actually they might well have lost that equipment. The Ukrainians are claiming that they've taken out several bits of those pieces of equipment, as according to a source I quoted from yesterday. I don't have any verification that the Ukrainians have caused the damage to the Russians that Ukrainians have claimed. Although, as it says here, as geolocation of Russian MOD's footage indicates that Russian forces only made marginal gains. So let's have a quick look at that. So this is the footage. We have tanks operating TATT 72B3 tanks, attack positions near the gas pumping station around Spirna. So they appear to be operating around here. Let's go and take a little look, see where that is. This is obviously much further down south. So we're coming down past Kreminna to Spirna, which is on the way to Bakhmut. And this indicates that there is activity going on in the grey zone. There's a gas pumping station around there, one assumes. We go back and look at the second geolocation for activity in that area. That is, just further up near, that would be the gas pumping station, which is a kind of like refinery. That was a place that the Ukrainians had for some time. It has underground tunnels, I believe, and so there's activity around there. So have the Russians made advances? They're operating in the grey zone. That could signify that they have indeed made some minor advances there, but it according to the Ukrainians, it has been tough for them in that area. But there could be activity in the Kupiansk and Liman directions that, as it says here, the Russian MOD attempted to distract and assuage information space paranoia over a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kharkiv-Luhansk front. There was talk yesterday about vehicles being seen moving in around the city of Kharkiv. There were Russian sort of paranoid claims that the Ukrainians could be attacking or preparing to attack Belgorod. That's incredibly unlikely. But anyway, what you're seeing is the information space, people in the information space, and people in my thread below doing this as well, Russian bots below, are flailing in the same way that you see panic on with the troops in Bakhmut and the 72nd running away, the Russian troops running from Ukrainian counterattacks. You're seeing that happen in the information space, perhaps people flailing, saying, and then trying to fight back by saying, "Oh, look, this is a pathetic counteroffensive." It's like, yeah, it's not really the counteroffensive yet. This is localized counterattacks. And all I wonder is, I mean, because it's a bit embarrassing, whether these bots go back to their bosses in the troll factories and say, "Boss, it's looking bad at the moment. What are we supposed to say? Like, what can we say?" Because I was saying stuff like Bakhmut was going to fall and it's going to be like dominoes, and that ain't happened. Can you help me out here? Not really, because once reality is in your face, it's quite hard to to deny it. Right, let's go towards Bakhmut because there really isn't much else going on. There's, talk about attacks, repelled attacks in Stelmakivka, Torska, Terny, Serebryanska Forest. Are these all the usual places we hear about? Stelmakivka here, just to the west of Svatova. And then as we come further down, you have Terny here, Torska there, Serebryanska Forest. So there is activity going on, but is there territorial exchanges? No, doesn't look like that's the case. So let's move on now to Bakhmut, where it's all happening. It's going to be difficult to try and work out. I guess we'll start by looking at the outside, looking at the north and the south. You can see, I think you should be able to see at the moment that there are some bigger gaps between my blue lines. I haven't moved my blue lines at all, just to show you. So there are big gaps up here from the blue line there and to a degree there, although I wasn't crazy accurate around there, because it's difficult to know defensively where people are. It's easier to work out where the attackers are. Well, actually, that momentum might have shifted now, so it's going to be interesting to see how that changes my mapping. But nonetheless, there is definitely gains for the Ukrainians up here near this reservoir that's there. A lot of talk about that reservoir, and to the south as well by the canal. So we look at War Mapper map, just go there to begin with. You can see that there's this advance for the Ukrainians north of the 00506 highway here that shows a move towards and just to the south of that reservoir. It doesn't really mention anything else, but a push back in the south perhaps. But the Russians have made some gains in the north within the city, and we'll come on to that in a little while. This is the Wagner map that is pretty substantial. It shows the losses over the last couple of days that the Russians have sustained, and you can see there are several points in the north where they have been pushed back. I haven't changed my mapping around this area because I haven't received any other information from other mappers about that. So that's more in up here, perhaps, but certainly in towards Yahidne, around the Bodanivka area, and towards Bakivka. There is a lot of movement. So that's in that area I've changed. But as you can see, possible changes there. And then around this northern point of this southern area and along the canal that I reported yesterday. So that's an inset there that gives you a little bit more detail of what's going on. So the Ukrainians are pushing them back on the flanks. And I said yesterday that you will likely see the Ukrainians put way more effort into the flanking areas. They will want to pressure the Russians in these more rural areas where they can bring to bear HIMARS, artillery, take out foxholes or trenches or people much more easily than if they're hiding in buildings. You're not really sure whether they really are in those buildings. It's actually easier to do an offensive in this kind of terrain rather than fight through the town of Bakhmut, because that will be incredibly intensive. So I don't think you'll see much activity from the Ukrainians in pushing back inside. I don't think. I mean, you may do. I think it's going to be more about the outside, so I don't think you'll see that as much. And then that will force the Russians to pull out of Bakhmut themselves, rather than kind of fight them building to building. You would want the Russians of their own accord to retreat and pull out of Bakhmut, and that would be the best way to take Bakhmut with minimum casualties. You'd also take a lot of equipment of the Russians. If they start capitulating and routing, then they'll leave stuff behind. Yes, you might not kill as many Russians as if you took them head on through the town, but actually you would lose a lot more of your own troops. So it's going to be, I think that would be the calculation that they'll be making, which is why you're seeing a lot more concentration from the Ukrainians, both north and south of the town. No report says Bakhmut yesterday. Ukrainian advances near Ivanivska. That's down to the south in this area. Bodanivka and Bakivka up to the north in this area. The area west of Pivnichny Pond is assumed to be under Ukrainian control. So that's here. That's that pond I was just telling you about. But this will become clear in the coming days. Fighting in the western part of Bakhmut continues. Wagner doesn't give up. Absolutely true. So this is what it looks like for Poulet Volant. I think this is I love put everyone's maps. They're just so colourful. Shows you the contours as well. Just and a clear indication of where the activity is taking place. You can see that it appears to him that the Ukrainians are attacking from the north here and across the canal to the east, and that would hopefully for them cut off the Russian contingent in this pocket there. So it's trying to cut off the Russians here as they move in. Hey, I can draw arrows too, you know. As they I probably can't because my mouse is stupid. So as they're coming in there and there, they're going to cut off that pocket of Russian troops in the area towards Tupochki. And then it's attacking towards Klishchivka as well. We've already seen places like Klishchivka and Kherson. They've been softened up over the last week and a half. We saw the self-propelled howitzers and self-propelled mortars being hit. Well, more mortars actually than howitzers, sorry, in this area. So self-propelled mortars being hit in the area over the last week or so. I'll show you some footage of that, and that would have been ahead of this kind of localized counter-attack. What else do we have? So Syriac Maps agrees that the Ukrainians are pushing the Russians back in those two areas particularly. The Ukrainian army continued attacks on the flanks, reaching Bakhmut Reservoir from the north and recaptured some more areas south of Ivaniska town. Kromova to Chaziv Yar road is reopened again, so this road is able to be used, and that will then allow the Ukrainians to more adequately defend the center of Bakhmut itself, or not the center, the western outskirts. That said, the Russians have made some gains in the center, particularly in this northern area. I've actually updated my map quite a bit for them to have a much larger area of this north that I hadn't updated previously, and then they've got some area here in the south. So on my map, that looks like this. So you can see where my blue lines were. The red line is much further on. In fact, even along here, it was back sort of there. So they've pushed on in this northern area quite significantly over the last 48 hours, and indeed all along here as well. So there is a kind of story of, it's a game of two halves, or it's two sides of this story. One of what's going on in the center of Bakhmut or in the western outskirts of Bakhmut, and the other about what's going on the flanks. But you can't help but think that these guys fighting here will be knowing about what's happening a mere, a couple of 100 meters to their north, a mere kilometer or two to the north, and they'll be pretty afraid, I would guess, pretty cautious about what they do, because at any point they could start to become encircled. So you wonder about the morale of those troops fighting in the center as they try and second guess what's going on around. Okay, let's go to the ISW to look at what they say. They kind of split it into two. It's a bit annoying. So they have it in their preamble. Ukrainian forces have made gains northwest of Bakhmut in localized counterattacks as of May the 12th. Geolocated footage posted on May the 12th shows Russian forces fleeing Ukrainian artillery fire on the southern bank of the Bakhmut Reservoir. Now, this is interesting footage. I almost showed this to you last night in my short video. Let's see if I've got it right here. No, that's the Spooner. Right, this is here. So some of you may well have seen this. It's doing the rounds. This is where the Russians turn up to do some kind of counter, some kind of defense of the area. The Ukrainians are pushing on. They turn up in a couple of vehicles, a couple of trucks to unload their forces. Interesting that, again, this is trucks unloading troops. There is no mechanized equipment here. There's just a kind of 4x4, looks like a civilian 4x4, two basic trucks, no infantry fighting vehicles, something already burning over there, no tanks, nothing. So just sending in the troops, and then the Ukrainians send in the artillery. And before they get a chance to walk it in, so this is being filmed by a drone here, and this is what you do with artillery, which is you walk it in, you're going to get closer and closer to those trucks, and then you basically see the Russians just do a massive runner. They leave the trucks behind and pelt it. Is it on this video? There you go. Oh, no, they don't. That is a truck leaving. I thought maybe one truck is left behind then. Yeah, there. And then you see these Russians running away. So they don't even pick these guys up. There's obviously a nearby explosion that sends them to the ground. And these guys do a runner. and that's it. So a really bad, failed attack there, where they're just making a run for it, um, without any kind of combined arms, uh, you know, capability operating in that area. So that has been geolocated to here. We'll go and check that out and see what that indicates. Here we go. And that is, yeah, exactly where we'd expect it to be. So you've got the reservoir there. They're pulling up to the tree line there, doing a runner probably back. That is probably where they were running through to. And this is where they were trying to defend, and the artillery just hammered them. And that's right on the edge of what Deep State map says is the Ukrainian front line. So the Ukrainians control up to there now. Whether that is post or prior to that footage, I don't know. But that's some geolocated footage there from the indicated by the ISW. One Russian mill blogger claimed that elements of the 200th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade lost their positions in the area between Hirivka and Jubovo-Vasilivka. So that is here and there. So losing positions there. That might be that Wagner map that we see here. That's that area there. I haven't updated that on my map, but it could well be that actually the Russians have been pushed back there as well. Wagner Force Group financier Prigozhin emphasized that Ukrainian forces are approaching Bakhmut and claimed that Ukraine now holds positions within 500 meters of Bakhmut's northwestern city limits, which is to say, they're getting close to this area here as they are pushing further and further back. Russian mill bloggers additionally reported that Ukrainian troops are counterattacking towards Kromova, Bodanivka, and Klishchivka. One Russian mill blogger claimed that the situation southwest of Bakhmut near Mayorsk has stabilized following Ukrainian attacks on positions of the 1st Donetsk People's Republic Army Corps. So that was the news yesterday. No kind of footage I've seen coming out, but that's Mayorsk, which is just down here, the railway junction there that connects a railway coming from the north to the one going east-west. So that is talking about Mayorsk, the counterattack of the Ukrainians. Right, just to finish that off, Russian mill bloggers and other prominent voices in the pro-war information space continue to respond to recent Ukrainian counterattacks with varying degrees of caution and anxiety. Ukrainian and American officials stated that Ukrainian forces have not yet started the planned counteroffensive, even though there are lots of people shouting about this being the counteroffensive. It won't be, but it's arguably part of the overall counteroffensive. There will be shaping activities taking place and probing to try and find weaknesses along the front line. Russian forces, this is going to their actual Bakhmut section, which is Russian forces continue ground attacks in and around Bakhmut on May the 12th against a backdrop of localized Ukrainian counterattacks. Geolocated footage posted on May the 12th shows that Russian forces have advanced between Marshal Tolbukhin and Irina Levchenko streets in northwestern Bakhmut. So just to give you a sense of where this is in this area, and if I turn the roads on, it really does help. So we have up here, there we go. We have the roads here, Tolbahina Street there, and this road here, Irini Levchenko. So those are the two roads that are mentioned in that. And let's go and look at that geolocated footage, which is Bakhmut, Ukrainian destruction of a group of enemy infantry when trying to move between houses. In other words, the Russians are in these houses. Where are these houses that they are being shelled at? Right. There we go. So that's actually further back behind the line. That doesn't show an increase in territory on what I had yesterday. I have, though, shown that on my map that they have, as you can see, taken some ground, the Russians. But that geolocation itself doesn't, for me, indicate that. It goes on later to say Ukrainian Eastern Group of Force spokesperson Cherevati stated yesterday that over 40 combat clashes have occurred in Bakhmut direction over the past day. So that's a slight uptick, and that will be a reflection of the Ukrainians starting to do offensive moves, as well as the Russians, certainly in the Russians inside Bakhmut, Ukrainians outside. So they say that The situation for Russian forces is overall worsening because Wagner is being supplanted by motorized rifle and paratrooper elements that are comprised of poorly trained and motivated mobilized personnel. It's not looking good for the Russians in Bakhmut. Things are tough for them. And looking better for the Ukrainians. It would just be interesting to see whether the Russians will pull forces from elsewhere to support the lines in Bakhmut, or whether they leave it to the forces that are already there to try and hold on and defend. If they get pushed out of Bakhmut, that will be an absolute PR disaster. They're caught between a rock and a hard place, like I said to you yesterday, because if they pull troops from elsewhere, then they might significantly weaken other places, which would then allow the Ukrainians to exploit those weak areas. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. How are Rebar, the pro-Russian source, reporting this? Well, they say that the AFU continue pushing the flanks of the groups advancing in Bakhmut. Russian units were forced to retreat behind the Berkivska reservoir and to occupy new defensive positions. Nevertheless, in the city itself, the storming of the last AFU positions in the western quarters continues. Wagner PMC assault groups continue to maintain the pace of the offensive, taking up to 200 meters per day in some areas. A difficult situation remains on the south of Bakhmut. The enemy has pulled up fresh reserves and launched counterattacks to hold the front line. Russian troops have withdrawn from their forward positions in the area of Krasna, that's Ivaniska, and the highway to Konstantinivka. So that is a kind of a mixed bag. They're kind of saying, yeah, we're doing amazingly in Bakhmut itself, but on the flanks, we are moving to more defensive positions. So that's how they are interpreting that. But the Russians are still making gains in the center. So watch your space, and we'll see what happens. Okay, moving out from Bakhmut, let's go towards Avdiivka, which is further to the south. Sorry, I'm all over the shop now. Further to south here, and Avdiivka, the kind of Bakhmut 2.0 that could have been, but again, that has somewhat. I said it's somewhat moved into a stasis. It's been rather like that for an awful long time. The Russians have made these gains to the north more recently, but that seems to have stalled as well. Just as we come down from Bakhmut, Poulet-Volon's map has the yellow. I wanted to show you this map because there are so many yellow arrows on it. It's such a new phenomenon. But yeah, coming down to Mayorsk, there's still some activity around there, but no Avdiivka map from Poulet-Volon, which I guess suggests something. So the ISW says geolocated footage posted on May the 11th, you know I'm going to check it, shows that Russian forces have made marginal advances within 2 kilometers southeast of Adivka. So that's going to be in the Spartak area. So southeast is in this area where the Ukrainians have made some gains over the past weeks, but we'll see if the Russians have been able to fight back. Here it is. So Ukrainians with mounted anti-tank grenade launcher SPG-9 attack Russian machine gun position in northern outskirts of Spartak, so that is southeast, at this geolocation. So this is where I presume where the trenches are. That's by the roads. So I don't know that this will show advances. No, yeah. So that's by the road as it comes around there. That's where the Russians have been for ages. So I don't think that shows advances at all. I'd have to disagree. I love the work the ISW does in compiling and aggregating all of this information with references. But when they say shows that Russian forces have made marginal advances, routinely they're just not correct on what an advance is. I mean, that bit of road has been under Russian control for quite a long time, right? So, yeah, that I don't think that shows an advance at all. However, there is activity down there. The fact that the Ukrainians are attacking Russian positions with SPGs, I wonder whether that shows that the Ukrainians are themselves on the attack. So I don't know. I guess it depends how you interpret these things. But there you go. That's Adivka. It talks about Novomykhailivka and Marinka as just kind of afterthoughts. There are unsuccessful offensive operations, the usual kind of claim there. That's not an afterthought. There will be tough fighting going on in Marinka, absolutely for certain. But no territorial exchanges there or in Novomykhailivka. And you come on down to hledar and on towards Velika Novosilka. Here the ISW says Russian forces did not conduct any confirmed ground attacks in Western Donetsk yesterday. Russian forces shelled the hledar area but did not conduct any ground attacks towards the settlement. A Russian mail blogger claimed that reports of Ukrainian activity in Hlyapole and Polohy area in eastern Zaporizhia Oblast are false. A Russian mill blogger posted footage reportedly of Russian airstrikes in a Hlyapole area, and I talked about airstrikes there yesterday, I think. Poulet Volant actually has a map of Velika Novosilka, indicating that there was this gain of territory in that area and a further gain, I think, over the last few days. I reported that a couple of days ago. That's been reflected in the deep state map that's in this area here. And I talked about that 2 days ago, I think, and yesterday. So that is being reflected more commonly across the mappers, but not mentioned particularly, I don't think, in ISW today. So I think that's a couple of days old now. Right, let's move on to other bits and pieces. There are all sorts of claims about Zaporizhia, accumulations of Ukrainian troops, so on and so forth, the upcoming counteroffensive. So lots of chatter on both sides. Also, Dnipro River. So Kherson Oblast occupation head, Saldosa Russian, claimed yesterday, or May the 11th, that the situation along the front line near the Dnipro River is stable, and that some Russian occupation officials were spreading false information that they found sensational. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces are concentrating forces in Kherson and Mykolaiv Oblast, while another claimed that reports that Ukrainian forces are accumulating boats on the west bank of the Dnipro is unconfirmed. And I almost reported this yesterday, but I actually forgot. It was on my list. So panic erupting on Russian Telegram channels after multiple reports of increased Ukrainian troop concentrations today in Berislav. So that is a place that was hit by this big FAB 500 bombs the other day. There is reportedly a large number of Ukrainian small boats gathering on the Dnipro River in the region, and amphibious vehicles have been spotted too. Whether that's true, I don't know, but it might be that there is potential for the Ukrainians to cross the river in a more meaningful way. So that's been talked about quite a bit. But other than that, it's all the usual kind of, oh my goodness, where's the counteroffensive going to take place, and routine artillery duels and whatnot. And that's pretty much that for the frontline update today. As you can imagine, most of it is focused on Bakhmut. Just something that has something's just come out now. Russian helicopters been shot down in Russia's Kherson in Bryansk Oblast. And this is, so TASS has reported that this was an engine fire on board, and it fell out of the sky, but actually you can see it's clearly hit by a missile of some variety. So it's about 45 kilometers away from Ukraine's border. It's pretty significant that has been taken out there. Saying this, that says that it's probably Russian air defenses that misidentified it. So I don't know. We'll see. There's no way that the pilot survived this, I'm sure. So there you go. That's the helicopter falling out of the sky. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I've seen another bit of footage that kind of zeroes in on whether it was a missile or not. On Telegram, Rebar English actually is pretty open and honest about it being a not an engine fire, that it was a missile that destroyed it. And yeah, another angle of a missile hitting the Mi-8 over Kherson. As a result of the hit, a fire occurred in the fuel tanks and the tail boom was torn off. There can be no talk of any simple ignition of the engine. Sorry, I'm just reading Telegram at the moment. I can't put the Telegram up on here, I don't think. And that indicates that Rebar are being pretty honest with what's taking place, which is interesting that happening in Kherson. So we'll find that on the map. So Kherson is here. So this is the northern border of Ukraine coming down there. Bryansk is this as you can see, the city of Bryansk is this oblast there, and Klinsy is just there. So that is some 45 kilometers away from the border. Would that be a Ukrainian air defense, or would that indeed be a misfiring Russian air defense system? I don't know. But anyway, helicopter there taken out. Anyway, that's the end of the Frontline update for today. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the support you give me. Take care, and I'll speak to you a little bit later.